It looks like we're live. I don't.
Hello.
We're new. We're trying to figure this out. We're going to stare at ourselves for a couple seconds here.
I don't see anybody yet.
I see a little one, so I don't know. I don't know how to tell who's here or if that's us.
Yeah, I mean, all I could see is you and me. Oh,
Okay.
one participant. Yep.
All right. It's almost 8.
Let me see. Oh, that's just to have a co-host. All righty. Hello, whoever you are.
I think we should just start.
We have 2 minutes.
Okay.
We could chat. What's it like in San Francisco today?
A little foggy.
How unusual.
How unusual for, oh, look.
Hi, Syra. Nice to see you.
How's New York? Is it hot and sticky?
It's hot, hazy, hot, and humid.
I remember.
Yeah. Whoops. Some drilling in the background. Let me know if it gets untenable and I'll close a window and stifle myself. Syra, if you're the only one today, we're just going to do it.
Oh, yeah. People coming. People
Is
coming.
DeSena, Tamar, hi.
Hi.
Hi. We're at 10:59 according to my iPad clock, so we're going to wait a sec and see who else joins. We're going to do this no matter how many people are on.
We got our 3 or 4. And I'm using my phone as a camera, so I won't be typing in the chat, but I guess we can say hello. We can talk as necessary. All right.
For some reason, I feel like starting to sing Memories since we're talking about them.
Yeah, go for it.
I have a very scratchy voice. It wouldn't be very pleasant. Tick, 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 tick.
All right. It's 8 a.m.
Okay, and 11 a.m. Central. Thank you guys for joining. Today, we're going to talk about community. And in addition to always wanting to build community around projects that I'm working on, causes I believe in, etc., I have heard whispers that community is one of the best ways to actually build your Substack these days. So there's a lot of different angles to this. We're going to just get into this a little bit slowly, introducing ourselves to the group. Hello, Kathleen. Nice to see you. And then we'll get more into the community aspect of this. And while you're joining, if you would like to, please put in where you're dialing in from and the link to your Substack. This is kind of like a mini boost. All right. Rosemary, my friend, I wanted to ask you to just let everybody know what your main Substack is about. I know you have several. And also, if you wouldn't mind sharing the name of it and what that name means, because I love the name.
All right. I have 2 Substacks, but they are parallel sister publications. Life is a Poem and La Vida es un Poema in Spanish. And so similar content. I am translating things back and forth between the 2 languages. And really, I'm doing poetry, memoir, personal essay. Those are the main things. I will be getting into, there is a community aspect to my Substack. And really, when I was thinking about the name, I was thinking of things that had poetry in it. And And then just the idea for me that like, uh, so my tagline is, finding joy in the everyday. And so I'm sharing personal poetry, personal memoirs and essays of my life in San Francisco and meeting people in the neighborhood and sharing the stories as I come across them. And I think the idea that when we pay attention to the day as we go through it, that's where we can build and grow joy because you're slowing down to pay attention to what's around you. That includes people, that includes nature. And then it allows you to connect to people. So that's kind of the thought I had behind that. And and so that's what I'm trying to share. And I am not fluent in Spanish. The Spanish community on Substack already knows that, and they are supporting me here. I have a team of writers on Substack who are willing to answer questions, translate things, find resources for me in Spanish. It's been a wonderful way to kind of cross-pollinate the communities, and and I'm enjoying it a lot.
All right. That's really wonderful. And I hope that if you haven't already, taken a look at Rosemary's Substack. She's got some lovely stuff on there, and we'll dive into that in a minute.
And what about you? You're doing memoir as well, but you have more genres covered?
Yeah. I mean, memoir is my main thing. I started memoir when I was on Medium, and it was an accident. I had been listening to a podcast with Sheri and Michelle Obama, and he asked her a question, what she misses most about her previous life. And she said, to sit in the world, just sit on a bench and observe people. And somehow when I heard that, I thought about my mom and all the time that she spent here in New York in Riverside Park throughout her life, like starting when she first moved into the city, joining us as a family a few blocks away. My brother lived a few blocks in the opposite direction. So I feel like we had a little enclave here. But I wrote a piece called To Sit in the World based on that quote. And it got boosted on Medium. And I got a lot of attention for it. And I just want to give a shout out to Ben Olnazy, who is also here on Substack, because he's the one who published that piece in his Thought Thinkers publication. So that's how I got into memoir. And then I think we could kind of jump over a little bit now to you, Rosemary. And how did you start writing or
Memoir?
memoir?
I was thinking about this a little last night. I started writing my first autobiography when I was like 9. So I've always loved all kinds of writing. I have an article in my Substack already where I talk a little bit about my beginnings in writing. As soon as I could read and write, I wanted to write poetry and write stuff. And I've always loved all genres, but I think I've kind of come to terms with the fact that I'm a poet and an essayist. And because I'm always trying to kind of connect with the world around me and contextualize everything, my experiences and whatnot. Yeah, my 9-year-old self already wanted to look back and contextualize my life. And more recently, it's just, I'm in my early 50s. Life happens, you kind of are looking forward and looking backwards. And I'm, I've made it through a lot of trials and tribulations. And I'm finding that there are stories that need to be told. So I think everybody has a story. And everybody's story is worthwhile, and that includes me. So part of my Substack is kind of learning to share my story and not apologize for who I am, where I've been, and where I'm going. So
That's a beautiful point. And a lot of people think, who am I to write memoir? I don't deserve it. I'm not a celebrity. I'm not a super entrepreneur. And I think and that's wrong. And one of the connections to community memoir has is when you're writing about your own experiences, someone out there is going to have had a similar experience, and they're going to really appreciate that you've been writing about that experience, and it might help them in some way that is unknown to you at the moment. And the other thing about that with memoir is that I want to just kind of tag on to this intro to it that you gave is you really have to think a lot about audience in every single piece that you write. I am a real stickler for writers, attending to their audiences. And that hook is going to be the connection that your reader makes to your piece. So when you're writing a memoir piece, whether it's about a childhood memory or meeting, your partner or, you know, nobody really gives a shit about just you. Your story may be very interesting, but you want to always try to step back from what you've written and think, what is my reader going to connect with here? So I don't mean to be like preaching on a soapbox or anything, but just,
and are there ways that you do that? Because actually, for me, I've had a lot of self-criticism, so much self-criticism that at this moment, I'm just writing for myself. Like, obviously, the contextual part of it is where do I fit in the world and that kind of stuff. But I'm not a writing teacher, and you've had more experience kind of guiding people through their writing journeys. And what do you mean about the hook?
take Substack, for example, millions of readers in a very short time. There's a lot of competition out there. You could be writing just for yourself, and that's okay. I don't mean to imply that you shouldn't be writing as part of your own journey. But what is the one line that's going to draw your reader into your story? And in notes, for example, you may have about 90 words to keep somebody reading that before they decide to scroll. And that one sentence needs to either really shock your reader, it needs to entice your reader, it needs to be such a beautiful sentence that they say, oh man, I want to read further on. Or it has to be something so gentle. If the person is a gentle person, you have to know your audience, what kind of people are reading you. What's going to connect them and say that person has the same sensitivity as I do. So a hook means many things, and your hook depends on who your audience is.
Right.
I tend to want to write beautiful sentences, and I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back, but there's a lot of advice out there about just get it out. And, everybody's a writer and everybody can write.
Mhm.
But so many of the wonderful people that I've connected with here, I take time to think about my hook, what's going to bring my reader in and what is the quality of that sentence, you know. And sometimes it's not like a beautiful sentence. As I said, sometimes somebody is like, wow, that's mind blowing. So that's what
It's true. I think each, like in my case, working in smaller, not writing the autobiography, writing the little memoir pieces, taking little chunks of experience, the there's going to be a theme of whatever it is you're mentioning at the time. And so, yeah, I guess there's ways to kind of work around that, honing in on the theme and having the story kind of circle around it so that you're not just, yeah, stream of consciousness or whatever. But I get that part. Yeah.
so, one of the other things that I just wanted to really hone in on is more on community and what that means to you and how you express it in your writing.
Yeah. I'm I during the pandemic when everybody in I live in San Francisco, all the tourists went away, all the tech workers went into their hovels to work from home, and I found myself I was working. I was working full time, but I had broken up with a boyfriend and had all my free time was just me meandering the city by myself, and I realized that Mm, I love my neighborhood. I live in North Beach, which is a very iconic neighborhood in San Francisco. It's the Italian district. It's a touristy kind of neighborhood near the water. There's a lot going on. It's a very art scene from the beatniks to, the art scene is very big in this neighborhood still. But anyway, I just went out for walks because I always love walking around, and I found people on park benches, people in public spaces trying to distance themselves from each other, but still find that community. And I'd always been, just a little self conscious about how do I start a conversation or, sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. And really that environment of being in this situation where you're just looking for connection. I just started talking to neighbors and I found that it wasn't as hard as I had thought it would be to say hello to people. And maybe because others were craving it too, they were more open. And anyway, that just started a journey for me and just slowing down, paying attention, saying hello to people on the street or in the cafe or wherever I am. And for me, and like I said, like when everybody's story matters, then, a quick hello can turn into a long conversation about whatever. You can, sitting at a restaurant talking about cheesecake and suddenly you're talking about life in the universe. And and then it's just amazing. Everybody's stories are you're in the same place, but you have your stories are so different. Where have you come from? Where are you going? What's your life like? You can live 2 doors down from somebody, and I just find that so fascinating. And and also just yeah, we need connection. I'm single. I have family spread out around the universe. I have lots of friends in the area, but I don't have a core 3 or 4 people to hang out with, so I just go out into the neighborhood now, and I'm connecting with neighbors and just listening to them tell their stories, and I really enjoy that, and I think it's important.
Yeah. So Rosemary has done a nice job of, sharing other people's stories in addition to telling her own. Can you talk a little bit about, that connection with that one older gentleman, the poet?
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
so there's a lot of poets in North Beach. Some, have been around for decades. There is an Italian man in my neighborhood. He has been here he came in his 20s or 30s. He's been here for decades. He likes to tell me he's 90 years old and he doesn't know when he's going to get old. He I don't remember what his actual you know career was. I don't know if he drove a taxi or if he was in an office, or I can't remember exactly. But when he was 70, he had some friends in the neighborhood that were poets, and they just encouraged him to start writing poetry. So he didn't even start writing. It's been 20 years, but he didn't even start writing poetry until well after retirement. And he's writing in English. He's still fluent in Italian. He reads in Italian. And he says a lot of his Italian friends have passed away, so he doesn't speak it as much, but he speaks it with whoever will. And
And how did you incorporate that into your Substack, and how did it impact your writing? That one connection.
I've put him in notes. I haven't really written an article about him yet, but
You published
but
a poem of his, right?
yeah, so his name is Diego, and he writes these poems, but he has a little satchel that he carries, and he has an iPad, and he goes to the library. He writes these poems. They're very short and pithy and very sweet. And he goes to the library and prints them out and cuts them up into little squares. And he passes them out to neighbors. He just walks around town and shares his poems with people at the cafes on the street. So everybody knows him as, Diego, who who has his poems in his pocket to share with everybody. And there's a lot of
Beautiful.
people like that. Yeah.
And when you write about North Beach, I mean, I could see it, because I've been there and I feel very connected to San Francisco in general. When you write about being in a cafe in North Beach, I have been in a cafe in North Beach. And as I read your stuff, I feel a stronger connection to you through that. And when you shared, Diego, it was very touching to me. So I appreciate that. Some of my stuff with community, it's not quite similar. Uh, I use a lot of photography in my writing, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
You can talk
But
now. Why don't you tell us now about because what I liked about your stuff is you're wandering around New York City, you're taking pictures of things and and writing about it. And I'm doing a little bit of that with my poetry, but do you want to tell me how long when did you start? Have you always done that? Or when did you start?
I started writing when I was 5 years old, right? I wrote poetry when I was, from 5 on. I journaled for many years. And through journaling, I also wrote poetry. I was a journalism major for a year before I dropped out of college. And when I went back, I went into a different area of study. So the writing side and the documenting of things has been a large part of who I am. I was very interested in photography. I carried a 35 millimeter, Olympus and a Canon with lots of different lenses for a long time before digital. I did develop a lot of my own images for a while, but I most importantly, I like to make connections between things that may not necessarily be obvious.
Mhm.
And I did that, when I was teaching grad school in an education program, trying to get teachers in training to really be able to see things from different perspectives. So I always kind of try to make connections between things that are seemingly not connected. I started this offering of mine, I'll call it, but it's really a system called Notes to Post about 3 months after I got onto Substack. I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed by my decision to write full time. And writing full time doesn't mean that you should be writing all the time. And I needed focus. I think I have developed ADHD through long COVID. So I sometimes need something external for myself to focus. So that's part of it as well. But the Notes to Post system is based on a memory vault of images that you create. And I have, as many of you do, thousands and thousands of pictures stored. For me, it's in photos. But what I've started to do is categorize them and label them and tag them. Whereas before, I might, have used an external photo source for dressing up my posts, but that's not what my images are for. What I'll do on the weekend is I'll go into my memory vault and I'll either select an image for an idea I already have, 3 images. Remember the number 3. It's very important. Or if I don't have an idea, I might just, browse through different categories that I've been thinking about. And, some of the images I have are old black and white photos from when I was a child. That really helps with memoir. There's one where I had an image of myself with my mother. I was about 4 years old, and she was hugging me from behind. We were at our beach club that we went to every summer, and it was cold, so she was wearing a sweater, and I looked very comfortable there. And for years, I thought, I have to write about that moment of being with my mother, what my mother means to me, and yada, yada. And what I ended up doing was I wrote about my father who was taking the picture. And sometimes a photo can stimulate memories that either you didn't know were there or that you have been trying to access or that are just, part of what you want to create. But what I do is I pick, and I have variations on this, but 3 photos, and I write 3 related notes on the theme that the photo has evoked. And that's usually on Monday and Tuesday. And then Wednesday, I'll publish a story that has been compiled from those 3 images. The bulk of it has been memoir. I recently went to Central Park with my daughters. I think it was July 4th. And we just wanted to do something outside. And I took a bunch of pictures. And I then remembered being in Central Park at pivotal points in my life. So, for example, and I don't have a photo of this, but but when I went into labor with my first daughter, after coming back from the doctor, after going to the doctor, they said, well, you're not ready yet, take a walk. And we were walking in Central Park while I was in labor. And, every few waddles I would lean over and paint, and people were coming over to us. And there's a church across the street from where we were walking on the reservoir in Central Park. And, they said, why don't you go into the church and get warmer? Aren't you cold? And, that made me think, wow, baby church. Anyway, so the park has a lot of meaning for me throughout my life. So that became a narrative essay.
Mhm.
It's not a memoir because it's about more than one point in my life. It was a narrative essay. So that process is something that I have been productizing, and I'd love to teach other people how to use it because at the end of the day, I know what writers go through to focus and what they might require for inspiration. You don't have to be a photographer.
Mm.
You might need to like taking photos. And I think in this day and age, everybody loves taking photos on their phone. And that's all I use now.
Yeah.
Okay. And back to you in terms of, I know you're,
Well, first I want to, I mean, before we come back, I do like that idea of, I haven't tried that before. I use notes for, I mean, I take pictures as I go about my day, random shots. They aren't professional necessarily, although the iPhone makes them pretty decent these days. But that
do.
idea that you're saying of you're gathering things that are basically not that you don't have to work to put the whole essay together, but if you already have 3 notes, for instance, with different points of discussion or memories or whatever it is, then you've pretty much written the essay, and then you're synthesizing it. Is that the idea?
It is the idea, but I don't want to oversimplify it. Like it could be as simple as you want it to be. I put the 3 notes into Google Docs because I like to use track changes to track what I'm doing. I'll put them in the order in which I posted them, but then I'll move them around and I'll change sentences. I'll add sentences, and it might turn out to be something slightly different,
Yeah,
uh, but generally on the theme, and it really does help. It cuts down hours and hours from drafting an essay from maybe nothing.
nice.
Yeah. And we have 1 minute left. Do you want to share what you're working on? And I know it's not ready, but you're working on something
Oh, I'm working on several things.
that you're offering that you are designing.
So so one thing is I'm working on poetry things. I have I'm working on I'm not a teacher, but the idea of having a poetry play or word play kind of workshopy thing to play with words, ideas, that sounds fun to me to kind of be a facilitator in that. And with the bilingual, it's just been an interesting process because I have the 2 newsletters, but people are crossing over. So I have people that I thought should be in my English Substack, and they're actually in the other one, and people are kind of crossing over, or people are telling me behind the scenes, like, hey, I speak Spanish, but I've been working on my English. Maybe I'd like to write a poem in English and see how it goes. And so I'm having a lot of those conversations, which is really exciting to me. So we'll see. I'm brainstorming ideas to kind of obviously there are people who only are going to be in one language or the other, but there's enough crossover that there might be some ways to kind of incorporate both groups and play around with poetry. And then I'm going to start podcasting um, in my neighborhood. Part of the community series is interviewing people who are community building in the neighborhood. So either getting people's stories, or I have several restaurant owners and small business owners in the neighborhood who want to talk about not just about their business, but how it's connecting people.
Yeah.
It's not just about selling something; it's about building community and sharing with your neighbors. And so those are the kind of stories that I want to tell. So I've got a few things. And, there are people on Substack too, like you, to kind of chat with here online, but definitely want to keep with the community theme, wordplay, self-expression, those kinds of themes. Yeah.
Great. It's really been fun. And in case you didn't know, it was Rosemary's and my first live. So we're so excited that we made it through without losing those of you who joined. Thank you so much for joining and listening to us. And I'll post the recording for this shortly. And thanks, Jennifer. Yeah. And yeah, get in touch with either one of us about our stuff. And we'd love to help people out. So go community. Talk to everybody later.
Thanks, everybody.